It was my pain in life that enabled me to see Josh's pain. So I'd rather be hurt a million times if it meant I could save him.
Just a quick disclaimer, the content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, crime scenes and other disturbing material. Listener discretion is advised. This episode is sponsored by Think Forensic.
Think Forensic are a one-stop shop for all things forensic science and crime solving. They hold experience days, as well as corporate events, team building events, and general education for primary school right the way up to university level, as well as other events and consultancy. There's also a shop where you can get your hands on all things crime solving, from evidence gathering to packaging and collecting evidence, as well as other forensic science equipment.
For more information or to book on an experience day, please visit the website. Hi everyone, and welcome back to episode 13 of the Grave Secrets podcast, and we've got a very special episode for you today.
Yes, you will have seen that we've put teasers out for this episode. So today we've got the wonderful Alison Cope here with us, who you may have already heard of because of all the wonderful work that you do.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for joining us. We're going to have quite a broad conversation today. You do a lot of work in terms of being an anti-knife campaigner, as well as all the work that you do within schools, colleges, right from primary all the way up. You've also worked in prisons. So we're going to talk about all that, but then ultimately what led you to become a campaigner in the first place, which unfortunately was the loss of your son.
Yeah, that's right.
So as you have mentioned, because obviously we've been watching lots of interviews that you've done.
We have, literally everything. Ever since you said you'd come on, we've watched everything possible, I think.
Yeah.
But I think it was really interesting to hear you describe the fact that you're referred to with many different titles. So I've mentioned a couple of them there. So sometimes it's that you are an anti-knife campaigner. Yeah. Sometimes it's that you are Joshua's mum. Sometimes Alison Cope, you get your own name.
Yeah, occasionally.
Without it being prefixed with anything else. But how would you describe yourself today?
It might sound strange, but I still now feel there's three versions of me. Mm-hmm. So again, it just depends really where I am, who I'm with. So you've got Depzman's mum, which is my son's music name.
Yes.
So that will usually be to his fans, people who watch him on YouTube, people who know of him. Then you'll have Alison Cope, the campaigner, and then there's me. Yeah. So I think the other two are established. Mm-hmm. It's the third one that I'm still trying to get my head around. Yeah. Still trying to establish who I am, what that means, and the new version of me. So, I think there's three at the moment.
And I guess it's how much people get to see of that third one, because you want to keep it. Yeah, they don't see that one. They don't see that one. Because you want to keep that to yourself.
I think it's just because that one's the really difficult one. So, because I'm not sure of what that person is, it's very hard for anyone else to really get their head around it yet. Yeah.
And how difficult has it been, like, you've just said you were known as, like, Depzman's mum to his fans, and then you're Joshua's mum. Yeah. Like, how difficult has that been, having to be there for his fans as Depzman's mum, but then grieving and your family as, obviously, Josh's mum as well? Yeah,
it's been more difficult than I can explain, really, because I felt there was no choice in how I was to react to the death of my only son, because of his music profile. There was just so many young people that were just not okay. And I was discussing this earlier. Within an hour of him passing away, I told his friends. Then within a couple of hours, social media had told the whole of the UK he died. And people just came at me, which I understand, but because of his profile, there was just so many people. I don't think there has been a moment, probably more than an hour, that I've actually gone to grieve.
Had to yourself almost.
Had to myself. So it's a kind of like double-edged sword, because on one hand, the level of pain I'm in to do with losing Josh, I haven't had to really address it properly, face it properly, because I've just been so busy being distracted by everything around me. And I think here we are 10 years down the line, and that hasn't changed at all.
Do you think that stopped you grieving?
Yeah,
as well,
totally.
then?
Yeah, which I don't think is a bad thing. And I think that when things like this happen, it's an individual journey. For me, I don't think I'll ever be in a position where I can honestly say I've processed his loss and what that really means. I have little snippets of it, but it's so painful. I just avoid it.
So are there people in your life that tell you to, you know, set time aside almost to be able to process things? Or do you think that they just understand that this is your way of coping?
I think it's a bit of both, and I think people from the outside looking in get very concerned for how hard I work, how I don't stop at all.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talk a lot about well-being, personal care, and that never happens. And I think it's such a slow process for me to put myself first in all of this. That doesn't really happen. So people are very aware of how tired I am, how hard it is, but they also, on the flip side, know there's no point trying to make me listen to anyone else except myself. So it's kind of difficult. People just like watch from the, you know, from the outskirts.
Yeah. So I do believe wholeheartedly that you would have been an anti-knife campaigner and a youth violence campaigner regardless of what had happened. Well, sorry, that's the wrong way of phrasing it. Not regardless, but even without having been Depzman's mum.
Yeah.
But do you think the fact that he did have that high profile as a grime artist meant that it was, like you say, from as soon as people found out, that you had to fall straight into that default? Because you mentioned in an interview that you know, you said, and it was incredible that you still had the forethought at that time to say, no, I'm going to tell people because I don't want people to spread the message in the wrong way and for there to be a backlash.
Yeah, because I think for me, the initial thing was that a lot of Josh's friends are outside the hospital, and, you know, one of the police officers that was there was great, but the other one had a bit of an attitude, you know, looking back on it. And I just had this horrible feeling that if it was said in a certain way, it would antagonise. And obviously, if they'd have reacted negatively, it's a reflection of Josh, So I just thought, well, I'll just tell them. So everything I've ever done, I've always had Josh as the reason behind it, because I never wanted Joshua to be represented incorrectly, whether that be good or bad, and in any way that gave, you know, the press or anyone an excuse to just, you know, talk about him negatively that wasn't accurate. So I think, you know, how protective I am of him and his truth made me be the one that went out and said that to his friends. And I think, you know, the vast amount of young people that were hurt, I don't think that's what made me ever go into doing this. I think it was all about, in the beginning, the fact that how are all these young people showing so many signs of pain, distress, trauma? He's not famous enough for there to be a helpline, but he's well known enough for there to be thousands of young people.
Affected,
And I remember ringing up all the different youth organisations, local police, etc., and saying, I've got X amount of 100 people outside my house, thousands of young people from all over the UK contacting me. Can you help me, please? No. They have to go to the GP, get a referral, and I thought, no way, this is not going to work, because they are very high risk as far as I was concerned. And so a kind of, again, my loyalty to Josh and my need for him to be represented positively was the kind of like the initial spark that made me become this, you know, this voice and being so vocal.
Did you feel like you had that responsibility to his fans and his friends then as well, to sort of make sure that they were okay and look after other people through this?
Yeah, and I think very much because it was in my face.
Yeah.
I had people queuing, and to look back now, I think it's crazy. I had like a traffic light system, so basically red was if people were actually physically cutting their arms, blood, paralytic to the point of vomiting, ready to fight, they were instantly straight in. If they were amber and they could have a period of waiting, they had to just wait for me. And green was like, just chill out, wait, we'll have a conversation. And I think it was because it was so intense.
Yeah.
And because I had so much experience and knowledge of difficulties, it was just a very natural thing to do. There was never anything in my mind going, I want to become this person and I want to nurture them all and, you know, show love to the world. There was never any thought in it. It was just
you don't have time,
autopilot response to a crazy situation.
Did you actually have any experience of dealing with any young people in this sort of capacity before this happened?
Other than your own?
No, just my own.
Right.
But that was enough to learn an awful lot.
Yeah. And when we talk about sort of Josh and Depzman, obviously the two different sort of people in a way, aren't they? And you knew the real Joshua, but his fans are there. Obviously, they've listened to Depzman's music. And did you find that quite hard to sort of 1 minute be Josh's mom, the next minute be, you know, Depzman's mom? And how were they different as people? Like, what was Joshua like compared to?
Yeah, I think the point that I realised that there was going to be a big shift in people's perception of me was Joshua's funeral, because before Josh died, I probably knew about 4 of his friends, and that was it. Josh's friends, and then I was aware of the music industry, but they weren't my friends to do. You know, they were the music industry, which is a totally,
they weren't coming round for tea.
No, totally separate things. So I remember when the funeral car pulled up outside the church, and all I saw was a sea of people you could not see for the hundreds and hundreds of young people. There was thousands of people everywhere, and the person that was leading the funeral, she said, you know, the church was full from 9 o'clock this morning. We think there's about 5,000 people here.
Were you expecting that many people, or?
I hadn't got a clue.
Right.
I just didn't have any idea what to expect. And at that point, when I got outside the car, I knew the minute I walked into the church, everybody would then physically see who I was to Josh. There is his mum. And I knew that Alison, Joshua's mum, at this point was going to step through that door and become Depzman's mum. Yeah. So the reaction from the fans has been just kind of a learning process as time goes by, because, you know, when you're in your head, little boy leaves, who you know does music, who you know is becoming very successful in music, and all these people suddenly come at you and go, we're fans, we love him, we've got tattoos of him, he helped us through his music. You're a bit confused. You're like, what? What do you mean? And then the next one, and here we are now, thousands and thousands of them. So now I'm more accepting that is the reality. But at the beginning, I just thought, what's going on?
Yeah.
Why are parents driving with their children from Devon? Why are people ringing me saying about their daughter won't go to college? What is going on? And it was just really confusing. But over time, I thought, okay, it's real, the reaction.
And it does then make sense that you haven't stopped since, because if you have that high, you know, it's such a unimaginable loss in itself. And then to have the red, amber, green system and to have that pressure from the off, it's incredible that, you know, you didn't have that time. You didn't have any time to yourself. No. Therefore, it makes sense that even, as you say, 10 years later, you've still not really had chance to do that.
No, and I think it's just too painful. It is just too painful for me to even think for a second that this is the reality that I live in. You know, and even now, the work I do, everything else I do, I just get on with it. I don't sit back and think anything of it, really. I just do it.
Yeah. So we'll talk about Josh in his childhood. But I think one thing that I found really incredible, again, in the interviews that you've done and the work that you've done, is the way that you dealt with Josh as a child. Because I'll let you explain what he was like as a child, but the way that you were able to sit back almost as a mum and say, he doesn't need me to come at this with resistance. He doesn't need this bad behaviour to be punished. What he actually needs, regardless of what he tells me, is for him just to feel love.
Yeah, totally.
And it amazed me that you had that ability. And I know you've talked a lot about your childhood and where you've come from yourself. But I think there are a lot of parents that do struggle, and they might come round to that way of thinking in the end. But it does seem that from a very young age, in terms of Josh's life, you did have that ability to think, no, actually what he needs here is just me to keep showing up.
Yeah, for me, I thought it was very, very clear to me what was happening with Josh. And again, people will say, well, how did you know that? How could you sense it? And I think, you know, if you go back to my upbringing, my difficulties in my life, people that suffer trauma become very aware of other people's pain.
Okay.
And you're very sensitive to pain. And the empathy is probably off the scale. So, you know, all the difficulties when Josh was little. So I was young when I had Josh. Me and his dad split up, which was both our faults. I don't think both of us were in a position to be the best parents we could be. You know, my parents helped a lot. But then you started to see the cracks. So Joshua just wanted to be with me. He was at his grandparents a lot. And so his behaviour started to deteriorate. Now, for me, it was obvious where that deterioration was coming from because he was angry, because he wanted to be with me all the time. And yet, you know, he was with his grandparents and doing this and doing that. And I just thought, whoa, hang on a second. It's my responsibility to be the person that heals the cracks. And he needs to be very aware that no matter what he does and how much he tries to push, that I'm not budging.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was very obvious. I'm not saying it was easy, because he challenged me to another level. Anybody that used to be around Josh, I mean, I can't even use some of the terminology that he used. I can't say it strong enough. He was horrendously badly behaved. He was a nightmare. But I adored I just loved him so much.
And what kind of age was it then?
When he started, probably about 4 or 5.
Right.
When they're little,
yeah,
it's easier to control because you can pick them up.
Yeah.
But he went from like a 4-year-old that used to kick and be kind of like talking and angry to a 6'3" teenager.
Different
so,
when he's like the size of a grown man, isn't it?
Totally and utterly. And I learnt very early on that reverse psychology was the only way that was going to work with Josh. To try, and I know that because if anyone tries to tell me what to do, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
So I realised very early on that if I tried to tell him what to do, he wouldn't do it. So I always had to do it in such a clever way. But he was showing lots of signs like fighting, disruption in school, getting into trouble. But then it was like that fine line between, he was eventually diagnosed ADHD, OCD, etc. But it wasn't just that, it was the underlying trauma on top of those kind of conditions, plus throw in his height and his aggression, and you've got a problem.
Because just one of those things, you know, as a young teen, just to try and cope with one of those is challenging, is tricky enough.
Yeah, very challenging. And because he was so big, it would always be his intimidating. So the police had a marker on him, aggression. So as soon as he was dealt with, it was, you know, restrained, pushed down on the floor, etc., etc. So even as like a 10-year-old, he was being cuffed and carried and all kinds of crazy stuff. You know, got excluded when he was 8, and then got arrested literally a week after he was legally old enough to be arrested. He just, timed it perfectly to be arrested and charged. But went to the police station. I'm there looking for this cute little 10-year-old off, and all I hear is F off, F you, you're this, you're that. And you know, you're just like, oh no. You know, and I was always like, Joshua!
Yeah.
F off. And like everyone used to just look at me and think, oh my God, whose is that child and why is he talking to you like that? But I knew,
They don't see, yeah.
I 100% knew that what he was doing was venting the pain in his heart to the person that wasn't going to hurt him.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's what people could never see. You need to tell him, can't talk like that. I says, look, I appreciate your opinion, but I absolutely couldn't care less what your opinion is, because I totally grasp it. And I think because I was seeing little glimmers of hope within him and little moments of reflection and trying his hardest to come out the other side, but it wasn't just a one attempt or two attempt or three attempt. We're talking hundreds of attempts. But there was always that little teeny glimmer. And as each glimmer came, I thought, okay, to the point where the penny dropped and it was fine.
When did you first notice his talent that he had?
He always had talent from a little boy. So because of with the ADHD, you'll see a lot of children with ADHD, their parents were always trying to get them involved in something.
Yeah.
So, you know, we went from joining Cubs, Scouts, football, horse riding, judo. There's a picture of him doing every activity you can think of. But there was always something happened that it just didn't work out. But drums, everything, he was just free and able to just, you know, not be constrained. So banging and making noise. And from about 9 was when the whole music thing started.
That's really early, isn't it?
Yeah. And I just think I think it all just started off because it was a trend. Everybody was there.
Yeah.
Thinking they're rappers, thinking they're this at bus stops, filming on their little BlackBerry, thinking they are
back
this.
on the
Yeah.
Blackberries,
Thinking they're this. And I think he started to realise that people were like, you've got a talent, you have. And I think with his ADHD thrown in, his work rate was high compared to other people's, you know. So I realised quite early on, but the reason it wasn't like the big push and the big focus, because we had to, you know, stabilise his behaviour.
Yeah.
Because I just knew that even if he was becoming the biggest artist ever, until his behaviour stabilised, he's not going to a radio interview. He's not getting up at 5 to do a tour.
Yeah.
That we need to balance that before it becomes
Yeah, you can't do one
No.
without the other, can you?
Not at all.
And was he aware of how much you did support?
Yeah.
In terms of him as Depzman? Obviously, he saw that you know, was an incredible mum and you weren't going anywhere. But do you think he realised? Because you have, again, mentioned that when he first said that it was grime that he was interested in, you were a bit like, what, you know, there's a lot of swearing. And...
Well, it's just the stuff he used to come out with, because I was always trying for him manners, respect, not swearing, not telling people who's going to punch him in the face, you know, all the joys that came out of his mouth.
Yeah.
So when he's on a music video saying things like, I've done a drive-by shooting, I'd be like, Josh, what the hell have you just said, and why have you said that? And then paranoia is like, everyone's going to think you're this, you know, and you're confrontational. So then I always thought the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So for me, it's sad, but the stabilisation took probably until he was about 16, almost 17, and he died when he was 18. So the priority of being his mom and make sure Josh was happy was the long term. It was only a very, very short period of time that it was like, right, okay, now let's focus on the Depzman version.
Yeah.
And that would have been, you know, I was already in talks with a huge venue to do the show. Then I'm like, right, we've got to do this, and then this. So that was so short-lived. But, you know, he just, his appreciation for the love and the, you know, the ability for him to accept himself, love himself and be happy outweighed everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't important.
No, it was just a route for him to do that.
He had to be happy.
Yeah.
Nothing else was important at that point. And he would have never been Depzman if he hadn't been happy inside.
No, yeah.
He could have never been successful without that.
And do you think that we've all heard about the sending for socks? Was that like the first sort of, what did you first think when you heard that?
I was mortified. I thought, why are you mentioning moms and why are you doing that with your hood and you just look like a thug?
Because he was quite young then, wasn't he?
He was. But I think with every video, because I saw there was nothing hidden from me, you know, I just used to try, and I say that like it was easy, but it wasn't. Just trying to make him see that, you know, how you represent yourself. You know, I don't want people thinking you like that because then you're at risk.
Yeah.
You know, and eventually by the time he was 16, 17, he started to grasp that with what he was saying, how he was saying it.
Which is still a young age to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Because when you're young, you know, you think, well, it doesn't matter how people perceive me. I am who I am. Do you know what I mean? You kind of, you are a lot more confrontational and defensive. So if even at 16 he was kind of understanding that this perception of him would have an effect.
Yeah, I think he changed so much. He really just wanted to focus on the music rather than the drama, you know, and I think he had quite a unique ability to just want to be himself and to, you know, some people always wanting to be the next artist and copy, which is why you see so much repetitive music. But he wanted to be him, for people to look up to him and be him. And I never knew where he got that from. He, you know, he was just very confident in being himself at that point. But it was a very short period of time that I was actually accepting that at last we've got to this point.
Yeah.
He's happy.
Yeah.
He's at peace. He's calm.
He's doing something he loves.
God. You know, now he can be Depzman, and then we can have a look at all what that entails and what that means.
Yeah, it's nice that he's so supportive on both sides, like as his mum and as Depzman's mum. It's just, you know, it all was, you know, sort of coming together, wasn't it? You'd got everything sort of all
I
lined
just wanted him
up
to be happy.
Yeah.
I genuinely just needed him to be happy. I wanted him to be able to process all the pain, all the confusion, all the rejection, every bit of negativity that had come his way. And it was a real passion of mine to show him that things can happen bad and the world isn't always happy, but you always, and this is very linked in with mine, you always have a choice of how to deal with it. And so I was always very passionate that when anything really bad happened, I'd be like this crazy little mum that would bounce up and go, okay, so you've ended up in court and you've ended up being wrongly convicted and this has happened. Pick X amount of friends, we're going to Ayia Napa. And what that did, it took the edge off the pain.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden it reprocessed his brain to go, okay, well, this bad thing's happened, but look where we are already and it's happy and it's fun. And that kind of started to really stick. So anytime anything bad happened, there was always something straight away
To counteract
to
it.
show him that, okay, this thing bad has happened, let's go, let's party, let's have fun, let's do something. Well, it wasn't easy because all his friends were crazy on holiday and I'm there like the old granny waiting for them all. But, you know, it really did start to help him. Really did start to help him.
And you mentioned the wrongful conviction there.
Yeah.
So that was something, again, in the real kind of infancy of his life, really, wasn't it? He was very young when that happened.
Yeah.
And again, that's where you say that it was almost the turning point.
It was a total blessing.
In which he realised that actually, no matter what, you're not going anywhere. Do you know what I mean? And then he can then see that, like you say, something bad, something horrendous happens.
Yeah.
But actually, there is light at the end of the tunnel almost.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, when they end up in prison, securing it, you know, it's very unusual for them to sit there and be happy they're there. many live with regret, many wish things could be different, but he was in a fortunate position that actually it's horrendous, but it wasn't long enough for him to be severely mentally damaged, but short enough for the biggest wake-up call of his life.
Yeah.
And that was when he was in that prison cell and the tears were coming down his face. He wasn't crying for his trainers.
No.
He wasn't crying for his friends. He wasn't crying for his phone. There was one person that he needed, and that was me. And I think once that penny had dropped, and also, he had to start to communicate with me because he was able to ring me. So, that grumpy teenager that couldn't really communicate had to hold a conversation.
Yes.
Had to put pen to paper to write emotion. And I think that really helped him to be able to start learning how to have a proper conversation.
Definitely.
Having that relationship. And it was a true blessing, incredibly difficult when it was happening.
Yeah.
And at the point it was happening, I thought, this is the worst thing that could ever happen. But people see the fight I have for Josh since his death, but the fight I had for Josh was there before he...
I was just going to say that with the wrongful conviction, and you played a massive part in that.
Having none of that. I was furious.
You'd even started back then before you even knew it.
Yeah, totally, because I remember thinking, there is no way I am allowing you to do this to my son.
No.
If he'd have done it, I'd have had to just be embarrassed, humiliated, and accept it and just deal with the consequences. But to know
Book a holiday to Iron Apple.
Yeah, totally. But to know he hadn't done it and he was in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
I thought they have no right to take him from the person he needs.
Yeah.
How cruel. And I just went on a mad campaign of contacting everybody. And I laugh about it now because I think, how embarrassing. But I wrote to the Home Secretary, wrote to the Prime Minister. I was, as far as I was concerned, it was the biggest miscarriage of justice ever in the history of this country. And then 6 weeks in, it was overturned and he came home.
Yeah.
But as a mother, it's one of those things where you don't want to look back and think, I could have done that. I could have sent a letter to the Prime Minister, but I didn't have. But you did.
Oh no,
everything.
I did everything.
Yeah.
I did everything.
Yeah.
It was just so stressful and so difficult. Even in the court when they're going through everything, and I was literally shaky with nerves. It was so sad. He was holding my hand and goes, "They're going to let me home. They're going to let me home." And I'm trying to be brave, and I didn't want to say, "I hope so," but I just knew that if they'd have kept him, he just wouldn't have been okay. It would have been so hard to, when he did come out, he wasn't okay for quite a while. He was doing the most erratic things. He was in so much pain. But again, it was right. Let's deal with this now. Let's heal him through this.
And you were there for that.
Oh yeah, I left work and I was by his side. But even then, just I don't know. There was just so many things. I think I've probably said this on the interview. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but the appeal court was on, and I laugh, not because it's funny, just because you just think, am I making this up in my own head? But I'm not making it up. So what happened was, the Thursday was the appeal court. So I'd got his bedroom ready and I'd bought chocolates and all this lot and was just like, please. And then the night before the appeal court, my house burnt down.
Oh my God.
Wow.
We had a big... it's a flat, and the third flat above was a big, massive fire. So on the morning of the appeal court, we were actually homeless.
Oh my God.
I just had to quickly buy clothes.
Like you say, if you don't laugh.
And I just remember having my handbag, thinking, okay, I can't even think about this.
Yeah,
if
it's just next step.
Let me get to court, see what's happening. Then I'll have to tell Josh, actually, we're homeless. But in the scheme of things, and I just remember being in Birmingham City Centre, waiting to go to the court, sitting there thinking, oh my God, but okay, let's just get Josh. And once I've got Josh, it doesn't matter where we end up, as long as we're together. But, but all these things that have been chucked at me have enabled me to get straight back up after losing Josh. So even though it's obviously horrendous, all those things were a blessing in a way when I look back, because there's no way I could be who I am now without that hardship.
Yeah.
So talking to you has been great so far, because it's felt like one of those things where we just naturally discuss. But for those that haven't heard about your work and might not have heard of Joshua or Depzman, if we can talk about his death and the events which led to it. Unfortunately, it was actually at an event which was in honour of someone who had been lost to knife crime.
Yeah.
But it was, you mentioned 10 years ago now. It was 2013.
Yeah.
And if you want to just tell us in your own words, what happened.
So it was a very normal evening, no concerns, because, you know, I was always keeping tabs on Josh, and if it had been an event that I didn't feel comfortable about, you know, he always had great friends that were always very, you know, they looked after him, so there was never any concern. And you see people judging the music industry and as if it's some, you know, really negative environment, and I'm not saying that isn't the case in sometimes, but Joshua didn't go to events that I deemed dangerous, and this was what you'd class as a really safe event. It was in a, you know, a suburb of Birmingham by the university. It was a social club. It was in memory of a young man that had been killed. Josh was performing a music track there, and that was it. He was going to go to the event, come home, maybe go out with his friends. So he got ready. So if I just go back a step, what was quite unusual about this day, which I've said previously, is his behaviour and the way things happened. So my son had released an album. His album was #1 in the iTunes charts. But when your album's released on iTunes, there's a delay on when you get the money because they have to process everything. So the money was due October, mid-November, but you get a report that comes through to say how much you'll get. Now, because I set it all up for him and did it all, it came through to me on the 20th of September. It said, "To Real, the album has made this many sales. In November, you are going to get this much money." And I was like, oh my God, is that how much he's going to get? That's amazing. So I woke him up, and typical teenager, if he had had to get up for college, school, cleaning, he was having none of it. But the word money woke every single, you know, part of him. So he sprung out of bed, and I had this gut feeling that we couldn't wait till November. I had to get him that money that day, which I don't know, I can't explain it. So I increased my overdraft, sent him the money. He sprung out of bed, went on a mad shopping spree, but the first thing he did was buy me a very expensive watch. Came home, presented it to me, all gift wrapped, just so proud that he could say, "This is for you, Mum."
Yeah.
So that was a huge thing, but obviously I didn't know what was going to happen, so I would rather he had spent it on himself.
Yes, yeah.
But he wanted me to have it, and that was it really. And then he got ready, went out, said goodbye to me, I said goodbye to him. Nothing unusual. "Love you, Josh, love you, Mum." Off he went. And then about 11:15 on the evening, the door knocked, and I remember thinking, that's strange, because Josh isn't early ever. It's always way later than he's supposed to be. And I opened the door, and there was a girl standing there, the girl that an argument had been over. And she just said to me, she goes, "He's been stabbed." And I just knew at that point that it was going to be the end. But how and when, I can't even put into words. It's like screaming, but no noise is coming out. The emotion is in the pit of your stomach, but you're panicking so much, but you're also aware so much that he needed me. So I was like, I can't freak, I can't lose my mind, I can't start falling on the floor screaming, even though that's what I wanted to do. Josh needs me. So straight away, hospital, "Where's my son?" And they were like, "Right, we're helping him at the moment." What had actually happened on the night is he'd performed his music track. One young man was there, Josh was there. They never really liked each other. A minor disagreement quickly escalated to a fight. throw in bravado, throw in young people, you know, making things dramatic.
Yeah.
A young man who carries a knife out of fear. And then a very normal situation resulted in Joshua leaving the club, the boy following him, and Josh was stabbed once in the heart. He then collapsed, was taken to the hospital. By the time I got there, they were trying to save him. And you hear things like that and you think, okay, but it's only when you go to trial you really find out what that means. So at that point they said he was gurgling blood, he was finding it hard to breathe, he lost consciousness in the ambulance, which is horrific, but also you think, oh good,
Yeah.
because he didn't,
He wasn't
couldn't feel
aware of
anything.
he wasn't aware of it, and then it was literally open heart surgery, rib cage sawed open, all that kind of stuff. And he fought so hard for 7 hours, which they said was very unusual.
Yeah,
they said
incredibly
he
so,
said he was
wasn't it?
very strong. And then on the morning of the 21st of September, which I have said was really strange, because I was at the hospital. They hadn't been able to really stabilise him, so there was never an update from when I got in there until about 4:30 in the morning, when they said, right, we've taken him to a ward. So you think, oh, what? He's in a ward? So
Yeah.
you assume that means they can do something and
Yeah.
he's okay. But actually, he really wasn't okay and kept losing, you know, there was no pulse and there was no this and no that. And then while I was waiting, you know, I'm not religious, but I knew before they told me that he died. I just felt it. I just knew he died, and that was kind of it. And you're just so numb and shocked and autopilot, and it's not what people think it is. There wasn't a room with flowers, there wasn't curtains, there wasn't particular care. It was a very kind of
Sterile.
yeah, and very processed. Like, I remember there was a big argument between the police and the nurses about whether I could see him because of forensics and this and that. Now, me being me before, me being me now, I'd have been like, why are you arguing in front of me? What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I'd have pulled them about that.
Yeah.
But at the time, everything they say, you're just accepting. So I'm just like this person looking at the floor thinking, wait for him to tell me what I do. And then you're in a normal ward, so you're walking past people in beds and they're drinking tea, and you're thinking, this is really strange, but it's what's happening. There wasn't any, like, you know, private room.
Yeah.
And I just thought,
That's what you expect, isn't it?
Yeah,
You're
you
taken
do.
somewhere private to have your
You just think,
moments with
this is
someone.
weird. This is really strange. And it was
Yeah.
literally a normal ward, and it was a last bed, but the curtains were drawn, and the nurses just said, you know, so he's behind there. The nurses were lovely. They were like, he's behind there. Take as much time as you need. And you're just like...
And again, it's
Weird.
almost like on a ward, you wouldn't really think to take your time almost, because you're so...
I was just really kind of confused. But even then, you know, I was more concerned about my sister. I think
Right.
with me, the problem with me, I say problem, it's just me. I'm too aware of other people's emotions. And I knew that if somebody was going to struggle mentally because of what they're about to do, it would be my sister. So I had to make sure she was okay before she said goodbye to Josh.
Okay.
Because I knew that if she wasn't okay, it would be very difficult for her to pull herself back up. But I had more kind of trust in myself and my strength. So then, you know, made sure everyone did what they did, and then it was me. And it's just not what you expect it to be,
No.
really. You know, he still had the machinery in his neck. He still had, you know, it was just like, part of it's like really thoughtless and really clinical and, you know, really confusing. And you think, how could it have been like that? But it was, and you don't challenge at the time. I just think it could have been handled a bit differently. And
Yeah.
then they just give you a leaflet on grief.
Wow.
And off you go. You go then. I'll see ya.
So you think you'd be like referred to certain people? You think they'd say, "Do you want to talk to someone before you leave the
Yeah,
hospital?"
or there'd even be another
Like,
room that
yeah.
you could go to.
Yeah, or they don't even have, like, the police at that point sitting you down and saying, right, with Sophie loss, this is what happens next.
Because did you even realise that there had been an argument? How much were you actually aware of, other than the fact that you needed to be there?
I knew there was an argument because the girl said, and
Right.
she even said who it was. There'd been an argument. It was just silly. She kept saying it, and I was just saying, "Don't speak to me because I need to focus here.
Yeah.
Please, I need to just focus on being as okay as I can be." So I was aware of that. I was aware he'd been stabbed. But you know, you're in the hospital. All of his friends are turning up. Fans are turning up. Crowd control. Police, people screaming. It was just insane.
And you've got to then walk out of this really surreal situation to all of those other people.
And that was hard because I knew what I was about to do. Which people are like, yeah, but you just lost Josh. Yeah, but the shock of it doesn't make you think, I've just lost Josh.
No.
You just think, oh my God, I'm about to break the hearts of all these people. And I didn't ring my mum. I didn't ring anybody when I was at the hospital because I needed to be very clear what I was saying to people.
Yeah, just almost present for them, but detached.
Yeah, because I didn't want to
yourself.
say he's been stabbed because I didn't want to traumatise them.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say he's stable at the moment, but I don't know what's going on because that's such a kind of unclear message. You know, so it went from his being stabbed and me not telling anybody to he was dead. So it's quite a really, you know,
And
weird.
in such a short space of time, you know, as you said, you'd seen him before he'd left for the gig, and this was just, you know, it was hours later.
Hours after, yeah.
Yeah, and they just give you like these little leaflets, and then you just think, okay. And then I was like, well, what
Where do you
happens
go?
now then?
Yeah.
They went, well,
Did someone take you home?
My sister, because I'd phoned my
Right.
sister, but yeah, there was none of that.
No.
None of that. I think the only time I started to realise that those, you know, services were aware of how serious something was when your own doctor rings you on a Saturday morning, you know, and then it just was madness.
We've talked a little, I mean, it's completely different, but we've talked a little about the services in the past because I know when I've really struggled, I was at the depths of feeling like I didn't want to go on anymore. And I got, unfortunately, it was during COVID. So I had a virtual session with someone in which they told me to think of 5 mindfulness techniques and basically 5 things I could smell. And again, you know, and you're just thinking like, this is not what there's no right response because there's nothing realistically that anyone could do in that moment.
Yeah, there was just no response.
But there was just nothing.
Yeah.
Like literally nothing. I remember sitting at home on the day he died thinking, don't police come round or something?
Yeah.
Are police supposed to come and talk to me?
You're waiting for that next step.
Yeah, and I was
And I
thinking, this is
suppose
strange.
Because the police didn't come and tell you he'd been stabbed in the first place, it was the girl, wasn't it?
Yeah,
So
she hadn't have even...
You'd had sort of minimal police
Nothing,
contact,
nothing.
really, hadn't you, from this point?
I had no, and it was only the 2 police that were literally standing on the door to stop people going in.
And they didn't necessarily really know what, because some people, you know, a police officer might have just been assigned.
Assigned.
To go
I think he was
and-
literally assigned just to make sure the crowds don't take, you know, because they were taking over the whole of A&E and the whole of the car park. But yeah, I look back now and I think that was just so bizarre. And then you just go home.
I wonder what procedures there are now and if anything has been put into place since then. Or if it is still
You'd like to
the
think
same.
so,
You'd like
wouldn't
to
you?
think things had changed, but it's...
I don't know.
No.
I just thought, gosh, I thought there was always a private room. I thought there was a period of time that they get transferred to that room and it becomes that whole, you know, plastic flowers in a pot and
Yes.
floral curtains and some horrible music as, you know, this kind of dramatic scene that you see, but it wasn't anything like that. It was just a normal bed, lied flat, normal, you know, the curtains around the bed and a white sheet.
Yeah.
So really strange.
So afterwards, you said you received loads of messages from absolutely everyone, from fans. And how many would you be receiving a day? Would you be replying to?
Then or now?
Then.
Then 100, 150.
And obviously over the years that might have slowed down, but do you still get the messages now? Every day?
Every day.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud. I mean, a lot of them are to do with my work, a lot of them to do with... But the ones that I love are the ones that say, I'm listening to his album. I'm in Tenerife, I'm on holiday. As a teenager, I sat in the park, suffering, struggling with life, and he inspired me because Josh was very open with his pain on the album. And I think that's why a lot of people are so obsessed with him, because he was so honest, but so vibrant and so full of life that they really kind of related to him. So I think when he died, they honestly were, you know, it's not the same at all. But, you know, when Princess Diana died, it was like this person that's almost not real.
Yeah.
So how on earth could they die? But Josh, on a much smaller scale,
Yeah.
he was so happy, so full of life, becoming so successful. So how on earth, when he wasn't a gang member, he wasn't a drug dealer, he wasn't promoting weapons online, he wasn't doing anything like that when he died. So how on earth could this happen? And I think that was the shock that really affected people.
Yeah.
You know, with that happening.
Are there messages that you get where people are angry on your behalf in terms of, obviously you'll get the incredible ones that you don't mind receiving at any time of day, and they, you know, they make you realise how much of a difference that he made. But I would imagine that it would be frustrating when you're getting people that are saying, you know, that come from it from more of an anger perspective.
I think in the beginning there was an awful lot of anger, a huge amount of anger, and it was very much lots of conversations to do with retaliation, lots of conversations to do with causing pain, and I was just like, no, that can't happen. It's pointless, but you have to respect those feelings, but try and manage them. So I was managing all of that, which was a whole nother thing. But now you'll get people that I think they feel so sorry for me, because once they hear the backstory, all the difficulties, plus how it happened and what that really meant, they just feel really sorry for me. And sometimes that sorrow can turn to frustration that can then lead to anger. But, you know, it's not very often. But I just have to, I don't ignore them. I just acknowledge that they've messaged me. Thank you for your message.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, I get messages to do with everything from mental health to miscarriage, homelessness, because I think they just see that I've been very open in my story.
And you're so understanding, and do you know what I mean? In the way that you understood Josh as a young person, in the way that you understand trauma, in the way that you understand that choice plays a big part in what we do, and not everyone goes out there to make a horrendous life choice, but sometimes it is just looking tough or being the...
Totally, and Josh gave me that ability to see that because of his bravado, his fronting, his attitude, his aggression, all the negative things really enabled me to separate. And when, you know, Armani, the boy that killed Josh, instantly there was a separation from the person and the act. There was never any confusion of that, ever. And I just didn't want people to go out there and make things worse for themselves, for others, but also you're representing Josh here. I am. We all are.
Yeah.
And hurting another human being doesn't really make it okay just because you're in pain. And, you know, it never will. You can't take your pain out on others.
No.
Easier said than done, but I think we should at least try not to take our pain out on others.
And now you are spreading that message to over 4,000 people within a week, aren't you? Sometimes within a day, depending on where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it is on a daily basis.
Every day.
Because before we started recording, we were talking about how here, there and everywhere you are,
All
just
over
in the
the place.
country. we were saying it's Saturday tomorrow, but none of us ever have an awareness of what day it is.
No, I have no idea.
But you, and I spoke a little at the beginning of the episode about the fact that it's within schools, it's within colleges, but you have also, and you do also work with those that are within some capacity caring or working with young people. And I think that is something that's massively important, because as we've touched upon with the way that we react to people that might be displaying negative emotions or aggressive behaviour, for a lot of young people, it is their way of processing when you're at such a crucial stage of developing how you go about getting through and navigating life.
I think there's a huge difference between, so with my work, there's two strands of it. There's the prevention of violence within schools and colleges, but there's also the awareness and the need to change the way we address these issues in society. So from government level down to safeguarding leads, head teachers, etc., etc. And for me, what society does on a regular basis, not everywhere, but on a regular basis, is, you know, if somebody's employed and a teacher or whoever loses somebody they love, experiences trauma, suffers an assault, they receive sympathy, cards, time off, occupational health, a helpline. But if a child's parent has died the night before, or they've just witnessed their mum being attacked, or they've been assaulted, they go into school with that pain and trauma and usually get punished.
Yeah.
And I just cannot and will not ever accept that is the right approach. We've got children going into school who have suffered abuse and, you know, get detention. That detention becomes an exclusion. That exclusion becomes you're not allowed to the end of term prom. We've punished you for being in pain. And if you have a look at most people that are in prison, there's a very small percentage that are psychopaths, very small percentage that are genuinely, their actions are truly calculated, they've made that decision to go out and kill, they planned to kill. There are people that do that, but I think that is very, very different from the young people that are in pain and need so much help and support to actually understand what their choices won't just do to themselves but to the people they love. Then we have a look at the victim, because if we always focus on the victim here, Josh is the victim, but if we'd have helped the perpetrator more, Josh would have never been a victim.
No.
Yeah.
So I think we go about it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Tougher sentences, so we want someone to die.
Yeah.
You know, Armani could be in prison for 100 years, but my pain won't suddenly ease.
No.
You know, and I think we've just got a really backward way of dealing with things.
And it's difficult, isn't it? Because, you know, you will go into schools and make a difference, but then it's whether or not they choose to, again, at a higher level, act upon that, or whether it's like a tick box. Well, we've had Alison in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Will that then filter down to the way that the kids are treated?
And I think that's
dealt with?
why I go from both angles. You know, I've seen a big increase recently of the conferences that I've been doing.
Yeah.
And I don't hold back from saying what I think. And I think I've always been consistent in my message, and now the penny's starting to drop, but it's only dropping slightly and so slowly. And there's lots of reasons for that. And I wouldn't say it's the teacher's fault, it's the professional's fault. It's a very hard environment, education.
Yeah.
And like when Josh was killed, you have these issues, you look out for all this help and support, and it's like, where is it? And I think that, you know, my whole argument is that schools need to be supported to enable these conversations, but also to enable the additional help these little loves need.
Yeah.
You know, Josh was fortunate he had me, but there are many that don't.
Many that don't. A lot more that don't.
Yeah, and you know, I think it was my pain in life that enabled me to see Josh's pain. So I'd rather be hurt a million times if it meant I could save him. But
Oh, sorry.
no, you know, do you know what I mean? And I think, you know, I'm grateful for my pain because I saw his so clearly.
Yeah.
you know, and then and what he had, which a lot of people don't have before they die. How many of us are truly happy before we leave the planet?
Yeah.
But he was.
And what a wonderful relationship, you know. I think there's a lot of people out there, and we try and talk about people who have incredible family dynamics and that are loved for the person that they are. But it is a lot more difficult than I think people assume, and it's portrayed on TV, and, you know, it's a lot more difficult to actually get to the crux of who you are, but also who you are around in terms of your family and your friends. Do you know what I mean? You can have that love, but I think it's when you feel the love, but then you also know them as a person, and it feels that you really knew Josh, and Josh really knew you.
Yeah, and he trusted me. Like there's lots of documented messages that he sent me. And there was one on Twitter that he said, no matter what happens, this woman will be by my side 24/7, no matter where I am. To me, that was a huge gift he gave me, with that acknowledgement that he saw what I was doing.
Yes.
And would have done every time he went anywhere. If he flew somewhere or performed somewhere, I was like a proper little stalker behind the scenes. I'd always calculate how long would it take me to get to him.
Yes,
if you needed, you know. And it was always that knowledge that no matter what happens, Josh, no matter what you do, what you get into, I'll be by your side no matter what.
Yeah.
And then, you know, and it's also trying to help parents see that not everybody is like me. So if you're not like me, that's absolutely not a problem.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a usual specimen here. So please don't look up to me as an example of how to be. Be the best you can be. And if that means your child's absolutely driving you insane, swearing, kicking off, running out the front door and not listening, that's your child and your relationship. Don't listen to anyone else's opinion.
Yeah, because there are parents that, you know, when there's stuff like respite care that you can get, and you know, for parents that do need that, or that would be an option for them. As you say, it's not a negative. If that means that then they can show up for their child, then do it. It's whatever works for you, isn't it?
Isn't it? It's removing that judgment. Like, I'm very aware, you know, people will judge, people have an opinion. They'll have an opinion on, you know, Joshua's, you know, behaviour, music. You know, they'll have an opinion on many, many things. But I don't care, and I really don't care, because, you know, when you've got a little boy that has been hurt and you see his heart and the layers of pain, is that his fault? It's my fault. It's his dad's fault. It's his upbringing's fault. It's his environment's fault. But that wasn't his fault.
No.
And it's our job, you know, I think our job to do our very, very, very best in whatever capability we have to help that little person, because usually they have no choice in where they're plonked in the world, you know. So I do try and support as many people as I can, to try not to worry what anyone else thinks. You know, I have many messages all over social media saying things like, well, what do you expect? And, you know, karma, and I'm glad he's died. And I couldn't care less.
You can't listen to those. You can't even give them any.
But
I don't care.
I know. I think we were talking about this actually, because we were saying, you know, negative comments, for me, it's one of those things where if I don't have any belief in it myself, it doesn't affect me in the slightest. If there's something within me that I slightly believe, that's the one that gets me. And you are never gonna believe those people that say,
oh no, never.
So therefore it is like water off a duck's back.
But also the fact that if they're saying, well, this, sometimes they're right.
Yeah.
and it's like, well, okay, so what you've just said, you know, presenting yourself online like that, like you're a little bad man with an attitude, so people possibly reacted to that. Well, you're right, so thank you for saying something that I already know, because I'm quite an intelligent person, but I appreciate you trying to tell me something I didn't. So it's just, you know, how you try and handle those comments. You know, I knew Josh. I knew the beautiful soul he was, the mistakes he made, the decisions he made, and I'll hold all of it.
And we were saying earlier on social media, you talked about the negative side of it, but there is also so much positivity still to this day, isn't there? On videos and interviews that you've done, like the comments that I've seen have all been saying, you know, how amazing you are as a mom, you know, talking about Depzman, his music, and that brings us on nicely, doesn't it, really, to the deep fake.
Yeah.
Just before we finish, if we can just touch on that. And I don't know how, you know, that must have been so surreal to see, for you to see that.
It still is. It was. That's what I'm saying. I have a really strange way of dealing with things. If something's really difficult, I just charge straight into it. And I think, well, what's the worst can happen? I don't know. That's not possibly a good thing, because I never really think about the mental impact until afterwards, when I'm like on the sofa going, I can't do this anymore.
If you can just tell people what the deep fake
so basically there's a very strange technology called deepfake, which is very similar to AI, artificial intelligence, which is computer generated. So a number of years ago, you know, you're thinking, well, a lot of these crime campaigns aren't doing a lot. Many young people are desensitised. So what's new? And it all started to do with seeing a hologram of Tupac at a concert.
Right.
And then it just started from there. And then I was speaking to a PR company from London called McCann. And we were just putting our heads together. And then between us, it was like, well, what if we could do something like that, but to do with Josh?
So was it actually your idea that you came up with to do it, or did someone suggest it, or is it just...
It was a bit of both. It was like, I was thinking one thing. They're like the creative, so they were aware of this deep fake technology. So my ideas, they totally, you know, exceeded anything that I thought was possible. And they said, well, actually, there's this very new technology called deep fake. No one has created a campaign with it. And we thought, right, how are we going to do this? And it was the hardest thing ever, because our vision, people just weren't grasping. And when it comes to youth violence, a lot of people say they do all these amazing things. Big organisations that had received millions to reduce youth violence were like, oh no, we don't want to be involved. We don't want to be involved.
Right.
Now,
and sorry,
I know.
Just for... is there justification that it would be too hard-hitting? Is it that they just didn't think that it would work? What did they give you a reason? Was there a...
I'd love to say it there, but I'm not. One big national charity that got 20 million just said, oh, it's not really for us. And we're like, well, what do you mean it's not really for you? You've just received this amount of money to reduce knife crime.
Yeah.
And
How is it not for you?
I think they were just thought, oh, this is a bit weird. How will our reputation as this national charity...
Yeah. So it is reputation based.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was very hard for people to grasp, you know, how it was going to work and the impact it was going to have. But as soon as it's Josh, I don't see past that, rightly or wrongly. So I was like, no, it's got to happen, it's got to happen. So McCann were amazing. They reached out to all their contacts, and what should have cost, I think it was about 400,000, cost £3,000.
Wow, that's incredible.
So it was supposed to take 4 months. It took about 5 years.
Right.
And then they pulled in lots of favours. And what had to happen was we had to write the song. They watched my presentation to get to know Josh, and then a music artist and myself put words together, started to figure it out.
And it's incredible that you... I mean, it's also beautiful that they let you have... So, I mean, let you is the wrong choice of phrase, but that you were able to have such a
They were
input.
So respectful of the fact that do not lovingly try and tell me how to deal with my own child. And respect it, otherwise it won't happen. And they were brilliant. I don't know if they're brilliant because they thought we're just going to do what she wants, or they got it, but I think it's because it was a bit of both. But it had to be Josh's story, not just Depzman. And then we had to get a music artist to try and copy his voice. Now, a lot of people are very scared of stepping into his shoes.
Of course.
But this young man called T. Rhodes, who I will forever be grateful for, I was like, people are saying you sound a little bit like him. And he just went, I don't care what anyone says, I'll do it. And I thought, oh my God, you remind me of Josh. And he was absolutely amazing. Went in the studio, kept trying and trying and trying. We got to about 80% similarity. Then a computer generated thing made it as close as possible. Then the track was ready, and then it's filmed. And what it is, it's a real person, a real set, but then the deep fake section is Joshua's image, 40,000 stills of his facial expressions off all his videos, superimposed on this body, lip synced, and then it's created as if he's come back.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Life.
Actually, and the lyrics for that, I've got to say, like, when we've listened to it, it was just blew my mind. I had goosebumps. I was like, oh my God.
And it's the bit that says, I look down and see my mum cry.
Yeah, I said that, didn't I? I actually said that, yeah.
That I've played that to thousands of people, and it's that bit that I literally bite my lip and think, don't hear those words, don't hear those words.
Yeah.
And that video is very close to reaching 1 billion views on TikTok and across the world. Yeah, I am so proud of it.
Incredibly proud.
So proud of it.
I was going to ask how it felt to hear him again, but that is the kind of beauty, but also the pain within the fact that he was Depzman, because you can hear him on YouTube and him as Depzman. You will forever have that record of. But this is almost another level, because like you say, it's him as
like Josh.
Josh.
As well,
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's when I first saw even though I'd been through every section of it, you know, from the design to the planning to the filming, I was by the side of all of it, but actually see the finished product. It was so traumatic for me, because I felt like I just wanted to grab him from the screen and bring him back to me. So it was really hard. And it probably took me about 20 attempts of watching it in my presentations before I didn't cry.
Yeah.
You know, that was very difficult. I've had to learn to watch it to pull myself back. But yeah, in the beginning, as soon as it was released, I suddenly then got the fear that I maybe should have got before, thinking, oh my God, was this a good idea, or was this absolutely ridiculous? And it was only after that I got really scared, thinking, what if all these people go, are you off your trolley? But as soon as I started seeing the comments and the
good
response, I was like, then it was like half relieved, half, well, you know.
I knew it.
I knew it was the campaign that I did, and I was like, oh my God. And I'm just really, really, really proud of it, because when you sit through my sessions and hear about Josh as a little boy growing up, not invited to parties, excluded, and then you hear Josh saying it, it really reconfirms the message that, you know, he went from a little boy that didn't fit in to the main person that everyone wanted to be. So, you know, with the right choices, the right support and determination, you never know where you're going to end up. So, you know, really proud of that, really proud of the work. And I will just keep going. And hopefully the penny will drop with those in power. Yeah. And I'll just try and change as many people as I can to see their potential.
So where could our followers or anyone watching or listening, where can they find you and find out more about your campaigns?
Yeah, so YouTube, just by putting my name in.
Yeah.
Instagram is AliCope74, and my website is AlisonCope.com. And it will just tell you about Josh. It will tell you about me.
You can watch the deep fake through your website.
Can't
you? That sends you almost to.
Yeah, it's called A Life Cut Short. It's on YouTube. It's everywhere if people want to watch it. You know,
we'll link all these in our description as well, so people can easily find you and find out more.
Yeah, you know, and I'll just keep doing what I can.
And do you have anything that you want to tell people, share with people? Ask us anything to leave us on.
Just talk about knife crime to your children. Such a difficult conversation, such a scary conversation, but do it in a way. You've been successful in talking about stranger danger. You've been amazing talking about crossing the road.
Yeah.
just ask that question. Ask them what they think about the subject, because fear is fueling some young people carrying a knife. And, you know, ask if your children are scared or not.
And I do think there is an incorrect perception of the fact that this only happens in city centres and more built-up urban environments, which is not the case at all.
No.
Because even where I'm from, it's very... it's in the countryside, there's a lot of young farmers, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and also it's not linked to the colour of your skin.
Absolutely not.
So, you know, if you are a young person who is scared of the world and feels unsupported, that is really the criteria we're looking for, not looking around looking for, you know, certain people, the way they dress, the way they look, the way they talk, or where they live. So don't make that mistake.
Yeah.
And other than reaching out to you, because you are still inundated with messages from people, where would you suggest young people go? Is it just whoever they trust? It could be someone within their school, it might be a teacher, it could be a family friend, their family. Is it just a matter of, if you have concerns about it, if you have knowledge of something, just to say it out loud and speak to people? Or would you
absolutely
encourage them to kind of go to a certain...
No, it's about, you know, I don't like to quote the stereotypical, because not every young person has trust in certain things. So it's about, if you do have someone you feel safe talking to, you can trust. If you are scared, worried, you've got involved in something on your phone, you're representing yourself in the wrong way, or you're involved with people and you're suddenly realising, I've made a mistake. Don't be embarrassed or ashamed. We are here to help you if we can. So just tell someone that you're worried, tell them you're concerned, and let them do the hard work and try and get the support. And for anyone that's finding it hard to get the support, keep knocking down those doors. And if you need someone that's got quite a big mouth, then they're very welcome to message me and I'll help them bang that door.
It's the element of choice as well, isn't it? Because as you've said, you know, for anyone that might have taken a wrong turn, that isn't the end. That, you know, you can still turn it round. If you have found yourself mixing with the wrong crowd, it's not too late. It's not a matter of, that's it now, I've become a bad person, therefore I can't escape it. You know, there's always another choice to be made.
There is, and you know, there's a big difference between a bad person and making a bad choice.
Yeah.
You know, we all make mistakes to different degrees. A lot of people get away with their mistakes and no one really knows about it. So don't be embarrassed or ashamed. Just, you know, acknowledge it to yourself, which is the most important thing, and then reach out and get help. If it's an emergency and you're genuinely scared, you might have to make the choice of ringing the police. You might have to stay behind at school so that you feel safe and speak to somebody, because the most important thing is that you are safe.
Safety.
You know, safety, and then making sure we can help you moving forward. And the more people that know of the concerns, the more chance we can get you the right help. You know, so and again, don't ever think it's too late, because it's only too late when you're in the position Josh is in. Even in prison, there's a future. So it's never too late to move into a better direction.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.
It's been absolutely amazing to hear your story and have you on
and
the podcast
thank you
with us.
for just sharing Joshua's story. Because if
thank
people
you.
take nothing else away, they should know how much of an incredible human he was and how that's inspired you to go.
And how incredible you are as well.
Thank you. Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching, and we hope you've liked listening to this week's episode, and we will link everything you need in the description, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.
Bye.